So for our next session, as we mentioned that we're going to start sharp at 2:40, the reason because here, all the honorable speakers will be coming from all around the world, not only in ASEAN countries as well. So we have from USA joining us as well. We have from Australia that would be joining in our next session. And of course, from Japan, from UK, and our moderator, I believe that are familiar faces that you've been seeing from a few seconds ago in the past sessions here. Just give me a few seconds here to kindly introduce our moderator for the last sessions where we're going to have a panel discussion on going virtual. I believe the word going virtual has been spreading around for maybe a few years right now after we have been hit by the pandemic of COVID-19. We're getting familiar with the term going virtual, hybrid conference as we have right now here because half of us here or half of the audience are from the Zoom system or from online. And some of us that are joining right here on site as well in Bangkok, Thailand with us. Well, the next topic on going virtual here is also a very important term that we are going to move on and take it seriously as well. So our moderator here, she's actually Miss Mika Takagi, Japan. You saw her face on the screen a minute ago. She's been here with us the whole time here. She's actually the director of Media and Content Industry Division, Commerce and Information Policy Bureau, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry from Japan. So actually right now her division promotes Japan's creative industry worldwide to support localization and promotion of Japanese content of foreign markets, providing a database that consolidates Japanese contents rights information. And also, her passion is also lies on the changing in our society with the use of creativity and technology. So prior to the current role, she started the Japanese government Cool Japan campaign in collaboration with the other ministries. So right now she's going to be as the moderator for our panel discussion. So in this panel discussions, we have 4 honorable speakers that would be joining us in this session. So I'm just going to mention their name, and then Ms. Mika will do the honor to introduce each of them in more details of their bio. We have Dr. Scott Wang. He's been zooming in with us directly from USA. Well, it's actually around 2 something in the afternoon here in Thailand. Well, I believe it's maybe around the whole 24 hours over there in the States. And we have Mr. John Margheriti from Australia. We have Mr. Atsushi Nakahashi from Japan. We have Mr. Adi Chand here from UK. So I'm just going to hand over to our moderator, Ms. Mika, please.
Hi. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, everybody. My name is Mika Takagi at the Ministry of Economy, Japan. So I take charge of the moderator for the panel. The theme of today's panel discussion is about going virtual, such as virtual production and virtual distribution. Besides that, I'd like to discuss topics around this theme, such as the future of content industry after pandemic, or the change of the economy, especially about Asian focus. So today, as the MC Itar mentioned, we welcome panelists from 4 countries, USA, Australia, Japan, and UK. Actually, there was a speaker from Thailand, but he cannot join today due to some urgent matter. First of all, each country speaker gives a presentation for about 10 minutes. After that, we will have some time for a free discussion. The meeting is scheduled to finish at 3:50 Thai time. So let's get started. As the first presenter, I will introduce Dr. Scott Wang from Digital Delight Enterprise USA. Scott, could you quickly introduce yourself and share your slides?
Sure. Hi, I'm Scott Wang. I'm the CEO and president of Digital Daylight. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the ACBS chair, Mr. Fred Wang, and I'd like to thank the Ministry of Culture for Thailand, and also yourself, Mika-san, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to kind of meet, and so I'd be happy to just kind of share my slides with you. And let me see, please, kind of bear with me when I kind of get the share kind of going and so forth. Okay, let me know if you can see these okay. So hold on 1 minute. So can you see it? Wait, 1 second. Okay, how's this? Okay. So so I'm the CEO president of Digital Daylight. We're a digital production and distribution company. We focus on games, animation, and film, among other things. We work pretty extensively with Hollywood and Japan, and with our latest collaboration with Toei Animation and and manga productions out of Saudi Arabia. So we have a full feature kind of anime that we hope to be distributing in Asia fairly soon, and so stay tuned, coming attractions for that. So for the going virtual topic, the two areas I kind of thought would be interesting, because we have kind of like a panel that has a vast kind of experience in kind of other areas of like virtual film and OTT and stuff. I thought that what might be interesting is just kind of sharing our perspective from virtual production in the games and animation space. And then following that, just virtual production or virtual distribution in the independent content space, because the independent creators are more like some of the smaller countries that don't have such mature kind of like game or distribution or animation distribution companies. And then so if they want to just jump onto the internet, they'll be able to get their work out there. And we think that that is what COVID has really shown us, is that anybody can get a voice out there, so you don't really need to go through a big company. Just to kind of like introduce kind of the topic, one of the things that's interesting about games are fairly complicated to make, but one of the things that we've noticed over even pre-COVID is that COVID really exposed a lot of the big, huge gaps and problems with the game and animation development space. And it was really poised for disruption. And why that is because before you'd have to come into a studio, there's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of data centers, lagging computer powers. But the thing is that with the talent, people from all over the world are so talented, but you'd have to recruit them to your countries, bring them in, and so forth. So that was a problem, like managing kind of talent from overseas and so forth. And then there's just the inefficient workflows that kind of stem from that. And then so my next slide, I'll kind of really highlight that. But what happened is that when COVID hit, now the shelter at home requirement really exposed these gaps even bigger, causing the big companies to miss a lot of their targets. But still, even during before COVID and then now to today, the market size has enormously grown. We have 38 billion pre-COVID, and even today, 64 billion in mobile marketing. What's interesting is a significant portion of these top-selling games are made by independent studios, not the big ones, because the big studios had problems really with their workflow because they were too big. And then so they were able to do that in a distributed fashion, meaning that they could have been from anywhere around the world working together, and they still did this from their own homes. So what COVID did was it opened a unique opportunity for independent developers with the right tools, with the right organization, and the right distribution to effectively compete against the big game studios. And then so here's kind of just a highlight of why they were able to do that. And then so forgive me for the detail here, but a lot of the big companies relied on technology like what's called Unreal, which often requires a 25-man kind of team to kind of manage it. But what essentially games are is you have a number of artists creating a lot of art assets, like 3D kind of models, characters, all that. And then you have the developers that code it, make that work, and so forth. But you have these in-between people assembling what the art is and assembling what the code is, and then they put it into the server and they push it out. If there are any errors, though, you have to pull it all back out again, and then you have to start all over again. And then so a simple 2-person edit can require 10 steps of tedious offline redundant workflow. And then so now that you have COVID, companies that are used to just grinding through it like together, they can't do that anymore. And now they have to have another person calling to coordinate. And then so we in our company found in collaboration with our partner Area 28, we kind of thought that, hey, we could take this even further, and we maybe even to optimize this workflow virtually, put everything into the cloud, and then have the artists and the developers in real time work together. And then deploy it. And then we just had continuous integration. We can compile and eliminates offline redundancy. So what I have is we have a prototype that works pretty well. We're going to have some games coming out pretty soon. But what I wanted to show you is how it works. So we put together like an example development session with one person in Los Angeles and another person in New York. But this equally could be somebody in Seattle working with someone in Chiang Mai, for example, or someone in Taiwan working with someone in Tokyo. So here's the workflow. Yeah, so you can see that this goes very well with the theme of going virtual. So they're doing all of this in the real time. When they finish, they can publish the game. They don't have to recompile. Similarly, I don't have time today to show you this. The same tool and idea can be used for fully animated productions. So we have an artist that was in VR that was painting trails that are off of this robot, like, for visual effects. And then and you have the keyframer working in another kind of area. And then the keyframer and the artist are working together at the same time. So you don't have to have 2 separate pipelines. So this also works for animation. All right, so the next step is, so what? Let's say you made these games, or let's say you made like the animations, how does like an independent studio or a smaller studio get their work out there? Can they really compete? You always kind of hear about having to pay a lot of money for marketing. But, from our company that works a lot with especially Japanese anime, and there's this fan community that they call otaku. But then even here, otaku are the mad rabid fans, but they seem to have more power than the corporations. So the power to gain views in the past were usually focused on brand recognition and also what's called or discovery. So brand recognition, you already know about it. Discovery is how you learn about it, and you pay a lot of money to do that. But then in today's COVID world, that's not the case. The market share has less to do with brand, but more to do with personality. So that's why you see these TikTok and these Twitchers and these YouTubers getting so much money. Like there's a 14-year-old making 28 million a year just like reviewing toys. So the case study is like, Funimation, Sony, Aniplex, and Crunchyroll are huge names in anime distribution. But interesting, when surveyed, few customers, if any, really knew who they were. But the titles they distributed were universally known: Dragon Ball, One Piece, Demon Slayer, to name a few. So it's showing that, that personality or title or the content was what was winning out. And this is especially true in 2021 and 22. It's almost changed the entire market dynamic. So for the new IPs, more people are attracted to the creators who make the work rather than the big companies that distribute it. So advice to any independent studios that are smaller that can't afford big advertising spend should focus primarily on creating great work, and then work on growing the community of fans that they have that all share and talk about the work. Be the personalities behind the titles, and the market will follow. And then so just kind of like, little kind of tips: find the community, find your voice, find patrons and fans to support you and share, and then find internet traction. And that seems to be the key, especially our key, for getting things out there without having to spend a lot of money. And then so that's it for my kind of talk. If you guys have any questions, or like if anybody wants to collaborate or something, I have my email here. But thank you so much for like your attention to and listening to me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Your area 28 is great. I just have a question. So
yeah.
You mentioned about the cloud working space, but
yep.
Does that apply to like individual small scale film or animation or games, or does that apply to a like really huge scale project as well?
It can, because instead of having individual computers working on all the assets, you just have one. So the cloud is your one computer, and everybody's working on the one computer instead of, I'm sure you've had a problem with, hey, I got a Mac laptop and I have a PC and the Word doesn't work between the two. You don't have any of those problems anymore. And then so these tools that we're trying to develop, we're trying to get rid of all the unnecessary layers in the middle and just let the artists and the coders work together, and then work on making it look pretty instead of working on fighting the code. So that's kind of why we think the cloud is going to be a really significant factor.
Yeah. I hope that there's a like matching service for artists to get to know the technique, like IT people as well.
Yeah. Or in the future, you may not even have to worry about it. Maybe the computer will be so smart it'll just do it for us.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott.
Right. Sure.
Okay, so let's move on to the next speaker, who is Mr. John D. Margheriti.
Hello.
Hi, John. Yeah, can you hear? Okay, all right.
I can hear you all fine.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is John D. Margheriti, and I'm from the Academy of Interactive Entertainment. I'll start my slide now, and you can sort of have a look at that. I'll just hide my video panel because it sort of pops up. So, and I'd like to also, thank the chair of ACBS, Fred Wang, for inviting me to present to you. A little bit about the Academy. We're a school, a not-for-profit school in Australia. We're also based in the United States, in Seattle and Lafayette. Another interesting thing about us is we're tax exempt. Now, what we're doing is, in '96, we created the first game school. In other words, we taught people how to develop games using Unreal Engine and other engines. And since then, we've been looking at reinventing, effectively, the film industry in Australia. We're largely done with the Australian game industry. We've grown now to about a $4 billion industry. It's quite large. And now we're looking for a new area that we want to expand into and help and assist our country to develop its industry. So we've chosen really film and TV. Now, for the last number of years, we've been focusing on developing really good talent for visual effects. And through that process, we started commercializing or investing in feature films and trying to really understand how the film industry works so that we can actually come up with something very unique. And we've come up with something quite unique, which I'll share with you. So what we're doing is we are investing about $200 million in a purpose-built campus here in Canberra. This campus is a combination of industry and education coming together. So on the 49,000 square metre facility, we'll have a number of sound stages, water tanks, as well as a new school of cinematic arts, and 650 beds for film crews as well as our students. The reason we're doing this and putting together effectively a commercial facility for productions is because we've done our own productions, but in particularly, it allows our students to find internships. It also brings, effectively in creating a film studio complex, it brings substantial profits to the Academy, and I'll explain why that's important. So in this facility, we have a number of facilities for film, such as ADR, Foley rooms, edit suites, final grading, and so on. And we're establishing all that. The first stage will be up and running by 2024, and we are developing some intermediary stages to get us there as well. So let me take you through some of the things we're doing. At the moment, we've launched the world's first virtual production course, film and virtual production course. It starts in February next year. It will be running in Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, and Adelaide. And we set up 4 volumes, virtual volumes, to teach future filmmakers about filmmaking and using the virtual production methodologies, which is in some ways ancient, because in some ways we've been doing virtual production since the days of Charlie Chaplin, but at the same time the new techniques using LED panels and Unreal game engines and display and all the different technologies coming together is quite unique. So these 4 centres effectively are helping us to train Australia's next directors, DOPs and so on in this new methodology. It's quite challenging in setting up 4 centres all simultaneously and rolling them out by February, and it's also developing the curriculum is quite hard as well. But we've noticed a lot of film directors and DOPs don't exactly know how to light a stage and how it actually works. So we've really got to build a new generation of people, as well as do master classes to teach. So why are we doing this, and why is this important? Well, what we're doing is we believe we're going to have 4 competitive advantages for our city, Canberra. And the advantages are basically the infrastructure I described, $200 million worth of works, providing really opportunities for collaborative projects within Australia, but more importantly, the reinvestment model. And this is really unique and quite insightful, which might help other governments to come up with similar things. So because the AA is effectively building a film studio complex, and we are making all that money in terms of renting our sound stages, techno dollies, camera equipment, Alexas and so on, ARIs and so on, as well as our ADR rooms and facilities effectively for film and TV, we make substantial profits. Those profits are tax exempt. And then what we do is we can reinvest up to 100% of those profits back into the production. On top of that, when you add the 40% tax rebate that our country provides, as well as potentially a further 10%, which our local government provides, it reduces drastically the equity that a producer needs. Now, I know this because I've done a couple of feature films and it's quite expensive. The hard part is finding the equity. And that's why a lot of projects don't get up. I think that with this model, we can reduce the equity up to about 50%. It's quite dramatic. So it puts Canberra in a really good position. The third thing is really about a virtual production education I was describing. So effectively, that's a 2-year pathway, as well as some masterclass we'll be introducing. And the fourth thing is virtual production leadership. So what we're doing there is we're building not only the educational volumes that'll help students to understand how to film, how to shoot, how to light, what are the restrictions, conditions for virtual production, because it's not suited for all projects, particularly projects that are done in the daylight, that don't work very well, or projects which have got large flash or explosions that actually display on the screens. So there's a lot of things, and also you need to combine virtual productions with traditional methods of green screen and blue screen as well. So with all of that, that's great, but what about the industry? So what we're doing is we're building in our first stage, and I'll take you back up to that screen. We're building here in our small stage here, we're building here our small screen for students. In this area here, we're building a large 24 square meter volume. It's about the same size of the Mandalorian, a little bit bigger than the Mandalorian soundstage, if anyone's familiar with that TV series from Disney. And then we have a much larger soundstage, which will be built later on. And we believe that virtual production soundstage will be in the 40 to 50 meter size in the future location. So that allows us really to do large projects in cooperation with other filmmakers. And collaboration is the key. So this is, for us, we found that in learning and teaching, or internally teaching ourselves, virtual production is quite a challenge. There's a lot of elements that come into it. The problems that filmmakers have is really thinking through a project beforehand. So we're used to having post-production. We used to think about this, doing a lot of the effects in post, and that's changing. Everything's going to pre-production. So what that means is that we've got to create all the digital assets, all the visual effects, all the components that are necessary, and shoot them in camera. So the director is able to see them, the DOP and the actors and so on, able to see on the screen what's required. And then, as Scott was saying, with some new tools, we're able to manipulate the environment and the world as we need to. As the director wants to change the scenery or the shot, we're able to do that. and change the setting and so on the fly. So effectively what you're filming is in camera final pixel, and that means that it's done. Now sure, there is obviously post, but the post-production side would be adding certain special effects, and then all the coloring, color grading and all the usual things we have to do. So it's quite an exciting new opportunity for us as well as institution, and we're really hoping that we're able to bring this sort of facility and find cooperative collaborations where we can actually inject our profit that we've made effectively on a production that comes to us into that project and reduce the equity. That allows our country to really develop more jobs. And this is something that other governments could do as well. The only issue there is you've got to have the fortitude to reinvest all your profits. And that can be challenging from governments. We as an institution, it's part of our charter. We've done that over 25 years for games. We created associations and conferences and really built our industry in Australia quite well. And now we're really looking at how we reinvigorate the domestic film industry in Australia. So that's pretty much all I can really talk about our space, our industry in Australia. And I'm open to any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I have one question. So you mentioned that you are launching the world's first virtual production course in your academy, and I'm wondering how many applicants are coming in.
That's a very good question. We have not many. We probably would say across the 4 campuses, we'll probably have around about 100 students. But we also got to remember that when we first launched the world's first game course in '96, we had 10 students. We now have thousands. So it's really not measured by numbers for us. It's really a new genre, a new element of filmmaking. And some people think it's technical, but it's not. It's just a tool to filmmaking. No more different than a camera, really. Just the way of looking at things.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a lot of questions, but does anybody have any question? We have an interactive discussion later on, so let me move on to the next speaker. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next speaker is Mr. Atsushi Nakahashi from Cyber Agent Japan. Atsushi.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay. You phone. I will share the slide. Okay. Can you show that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So going virtual today, I'd like to talk from Japan, the theme of going virtual. Okay, I have only 10 minutes, so let's hurry up. Okay, first let me introduce the company and myself. Okay, let's move on. Okay, the Cyber Agent has 3 business divisions: internet advertising, media, and games. In the advertising business, we cover both media and creative productions. About 2,000 employees here, so pretty big divisions. And in the media business, we provide a future TV service called Abema TV with more than 50 million app downloads. It's becoming a national service. And our game business, we mainly deal with the social games and are expected to expand globally. Okay. The unique point is that it's about covering all the digital fields in one company and creating a synergy. Okay, and I belong to the advertising department, and as a creative director, I do a variety of creations such as video, digital campaigns, and CG productions. It's exciting every day. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you about the studios and the facilities we have. Okay, the first, we're constantly battling these issues: speed, quality, and the cost. Especially in the advertising field, it always requires a high level of quality in a very short period of time, such as 2 to 3 months to release, sometimes in 1 month. Is it the same all over the world? I hope not. Okay. Okay, I will share the studio. This is a photogrammetry studio. This studio is often used for games, I think, but we mainly use it for advertising field. As I'm going to show you later, we use it for creating digital humans. And the second one, this is avatar track, aka avatar track. Okay, this is probably unique studies for you guys. It was developed for athletes, celebrities, and other people who have limited time to scan. Let's watch the video. Okay.
Providing the finest 3D facial scan anywhere, anytime. We have
スキャントラックはかなり高性能のカメラを使っていて、今までだったら撮れなかった、例えばちょっとした肌のくぼみとか細かい情報を全部撮ることができるんで、もっとリアルな顔が撮れるんですよね。ライトシステムも非常に最先端のものを使ってるんで、肌のツヤとかそういうものの表現っていうのがもっとうまくできるようになっているのが一番です。
Okay, so we can go anywhere. And the quality is very high. So actually the lighting system is very unique. So now we are making digital humans with this avatar. So the number of people we can scan is increasing. Okay. So next one, motion capture system. Of course, we have in the same studio. And the next one is Greenback Studio. It should look for familiar, but we have combined it with a real-time compositing system. This allows us to cut down on post-production time and also allows us to do live streaming. Let's watch the showcase video. Okay. Yeah, like that. She's in the nice house. Reflections. You can see the reflections on the kitchen board, like that. Yeah, and this is the video as it was taken. And a back and forth. Now she is in the nice house, but actually she's acting in the Greenback studio. Yeah. And this is focus. We can also move the focus. Yeah, like that. And next one is we can move the camera dramatically, dynamically, like that. Yeah. Yeah, like that. Okay, and the next showcase is Wang Mariyama. It's a famous fashion brand that showcase. Yeah, like that. In this way, we were able to express the brand's philosophy. Of course, it's not easy to express everything in a small studio, but the possibilities for creation are expanding. Okay. Okay, let's move on next one. LED wall. Yeah. With this system, I can now recreate any location. Okay, I will show you the showcase.
が高めやすいと感じました。
肌への照り返しや瞳への反射などは手間のかかる後処理が必要だったんですけど、撮影したままで自然に表現できることもメリットだと思います。合成作業が必要ないので、髪の毛一本一本まではっきり見せやすいことと、作業時間の削減が期待できると思います。
LED 撮影で可能性を感じたところは、ロケに行かないところですね。普段ロケーションというのが一番撮影において悩むので、それを一気に解決してくれるというのが本当に一番いいところかなと、まず最初に思いました。一から考えて作り上げていくっていう目標を一緒に達成しようというところが、一本の自主制作映画を作るみたいで、こういうアイデアがいいとか、ああいうアイデアがいいとか、すぐ言ってすぐ試してっていう連携がとても楽しかったです。それが今回一緒にやってよかったことだと思うし、サイバーエージェントっていう特殊な環境だったから。
Yeah. So this is with the LED wall, we can use what we have shot as it did. It also makes it easier for the performers to act and get emotion involved. Okay. So the next one is virtual human. Okay. So next, let's talk about the virtual humans. As the metaverse continues to expand, the virtual humans are going to have a wider range of activities. Let's watch the video too. Yeah, like that. For example, new brands will be launched on Metaverse. I think the e-commerce situation will also change dramatically depending on what happens at Metaverse. Virtual humans are expected to be active in virtual space, like that. Okay, this project has just begun. Please stay tuned. Thank you. Yeah, okay, the final subject, about Japanese market. All of the areas listed here are growing. For example, the store experience is being augmented with AR. Digital twin talents are being used in advertising, and fashion shows and the pay-per-view virtual life have also seen significant growth. Yeah. And in Japan, the COVID-19 condition has been already quiet now, but I think that in the future, physical and the virtual will coexist, and the consumer will be able to make a wide range of choices. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, thank you. Let's talk later.
Thank you very much, Atsushi. I was curious to know which one was the real Ai Tominaga, but
yeah.
I knew.
I'm the different.
Thank you so much. So we are running out of time for your presentation, so let's leave the questions later, okay? Thank you very much. So let's move on to our next speaker, and next and the last speaker, Mr. Adi Chan at PTL Entertainment from UK.
Hi, Mika. Thank you so much. Hi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Fred, for inviting me back, and Kunsura-sak as well. Thank you for the time to come and speak today. I was obviously speaking at ACBS in 2019, where my company TTL that I had set up was focused on developing a new virtual system and content studio that would operate out of Asia, but globally as well, with different partners between East and West. Today, I thought, the best thing would be to go through some research that we had found, more high-level personalized research regarding, the years of 2019 to 2021. Let me share my screen. And talk about, the virtual production world and what it means. And, if anyone has any questions, I'd love to understand more, please do let me know. So I'm going to run through kind of a top level gaps that we see between pre-production, production, post-production, distribution, and then where that leaves us with an integrated Asia, as well as production system for the rest of the world that I think we are looking towards. The research we did, obviously during pandemic, couldn't really go anywhere, but we talked from from relationships all the way from the big studios, Warner, Disney, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, etc., all the way to European studios such as Studio Canal, Pathé, Beta Cinema, Wild Bunch, and also independent mini majors between East and West. So Red Chillies, for example, in India, that is run by the Shah Rukh Khan, which is the Indian Bollywood actor, all the way to A24, which is a very famous American independent production studio, all the way to Heyday Films, who's David Heyman, who produced Harry Potter. So we talked to a range of different types of businesses, from small, independent to studios, to understand what they think is lacking. And I'm just going to go through it so you guys can see kind of the full scope of how we see, a conclusion of what could be the case with virtual production. Pre-production wise, you have your typical softwares that have been used in the industry that are slowly changing with virtual production. Celtex, of course, is one of that screenwriting softwares, Final Draft, Studio Binder. Obviously, Dato Kamal mentioned you guys are writing scripts, for example, as well. Final Draft, of course, and Celtex, as well as Studio Binder, have integrated more virtual systems essentially into their program to allow for collaboration with screenwriters from around the world in real time. That is happening, but the big fragmentation is the utilization of this on set. One of the examples here was my relationship with Village Roadshow, which actually, John, I'm sure you know of being an Australian company. And when Village was producing The Joker for Warner Brothers, one of the biggest problems they had was when there were script changes, it took almost a week to get script changes approved, which delays production, of course, costs more money because there was no real-time system that allowed them to call back any of the execs or even go meet with any of the execs because of the COVID regulations to allow them to kind of get an approval quickly. That is a big problem, of course, when you're on set and you have to make quick script adjustments and adjust budget at the same time and schedule. So this is one of the big problems we saw with the script writing softwares. Collaboration-wise, it's doing very well from a virtual perspective, but virtually in a practical manner, when you're trying to adjust scripts and get executive decisions, it still seems to be a big problem. Secondly was production, of course. In production, one of the big problems we've been seeing, of course, in Asia, along with the rest of the world in some capacities, and I didn't know this actually until we went into a couple of research discussions in the US, is also something that's happening a lot with the studios. And that's obviously, management and production systems on set, mainly in accounting. Of course, today, accounting is a big problem for obviously certain Asian countries where there is no digitized system to allow for accurate accounting. This is something that's lacking as well. Beyond this, in terms of just day-to-day production financing, actually in the US, again, I'll use an example here, first of all, in India, with Red Chillies, which is the Shah Rukh Khan company. Of course, they have struggled to keep up with Netflix's demands because of the accounting issues. There are constantly accounting issues because on set, of course, in India, you don't have a digitized system. Some people don't have bank accounts, so you're paying by cash. And this is actually something that COVID has highlighted even more. It's not that this problem happened because of COVID, it's been there. And COVID has kind of put it to the forefront to say, we need to find a system that could be out. In the US, I didn't realize even, and again, this is adding to my chat with Village Roadshow specifically. Of course, everyone is using Zoom, WhatsApp, and emails to trigger capital on a day-to-day basis. When a movie's produced, you have obviously each week a certain amount you're paying on a payment plan according to your bonded insurance of the picture. And that payment plan has to be triggered, of course, by the bond company, but also by your accounting team, as well as whoever is operating the capital. Big problems in the West, beyond just accounting, was really it took a week to 2 weeks to ask for an additional amount if needed on set by just, I think it was back and forth emails and WhatsApps that took almost a week or so to get a decision. So there is no streamlined system that allows for the accounting, for the communication to executives in real time to allow us to limit that as well. Sorry. Post-production, of course, Dr. Scott Wang and obviously John has talked about this as well, which I found very fascinating. But I think the big problem here was I was talking with Incendio and Company 9. Company 9, they call it Blade Runner, which is the new futuristic kind of science fiction film. And the biggest problem, I'm sure they can add to it, is security, of course, which you can go virtual 100%, but any studio who's going to work with you, any big client, I would say, is going to ask the first question, what about security? And how do we create a system where the virtual production can be secure? People are looking at AI for that, all the way to blockchain right now. But of course, I think this is a gap that we've been seeing. Talking, of course, with the Blade Runner guys, I think the biggest problem was they had a couple of shots that nearly leaked. And there was a back and forth on that front where you don't want the public to see what they're doing. And this seems to be a massive gap between Asia, US, and Europe as well, of course. And then, of course, the final stage is distribution. And I was talking to a European company by the name of Wild Bunch that I know very well. And Wild Bunch, of course, is a distributor that obviously shows up at a mix of different film markets. Markets have gone virtual, definitely. People have, obviously, Cannes last year as well, Sundance. The big problem I've been hearing from distributors is that, distribution and selling a movie is a very personalized experience. You need to know your filmmaker, you need to get to know your producer, you need to kind of like them. I think you need to, understand why they made the film beyond just simply looking at a digital screen and viewing a film individually. And I think a lot of people, Wild Bunch specifically, was hoping for almost an integrated platform that would allow for screening and a more personalized experience. Concourse Media, which is out of the US, they've done a lot of independent films at Sundance and rep films at Venice and Cannes. They were struggling as a sales agent in terms of how can they get their movies out. And similar to what we've been discussing today from a virtual level, but also how to integrate technology for the new world. Elements like NFTs are being used now. Director Kevin Smith, of course, more of a cult director, he just did a film where he didn't go to a distributor. He distributed his film as an NFT and made probably quadruple the amount that he would make by going to a distributor. COVID has, obviously, I'm sure everyone knows, has backdated distribution as well, almost 3 to 4 years. So a lot of independent filmmakers, a lot of even films that are studio driven, of course, like Bond has been pushed back for so long. People need to find other means of monetization. So where does this kind of research leave us from a top level? I think there are pros and cons with the way in which the world has moved from a virtual production stage. I think, first of all, Asia and with ACBS and obviously the mission behind it, I see, has obviously become virtual integration can become a huge tool to integrate the region because I think beyond just the multilingual and the fragmentation between language, between different territories in the region, it allows us to streamline that and find ways to collaborate as an ecosystem in that capacity. Obviously, based on what I'm talking about today, streamlined production as a solution, of course, is a big move after the post-pandemic age. And I think this is going to be more and more prevalent. I think it's going to be, as I said, with accounting, it's also taking on old issues that were happening on production before COVID and finding ways to fix those in addition to creating a post-pandemic solution as well to streamline production in a smooth manner. Thirdly, I think this would allow for companies that maybe do not play with the studios and are more independent globally to actually implement international standards of production. Indirectly, they can learn from an education perspective that this is how, industry level, essentially studios, bigger companies that are getting those bigger checks, that are working in that level, can play with, and they can implement these kind of production standards into their kind of day-to-day production needs. Number 4, I would say, is obviously integration of technology. I think blockchain for sure is a big one. I know it's not spelled there properly, apologies, but blockchain is a big one, of course, that I think is going to power a lot of different systems. Simply, if you look at accounting, blockchain allows for smart contracts to occur. And if somebody tells me, hey, I didn't actually spend X amount, I can actually check if you really did, and I have a trail using blockchain. So there's secure mechanisms of using blockchain to help with that. And then lastly, what we've been looking at is just on a more generic scale, not just with my company, but working with BAFTA and talking with them, obviously Mr. Fred, and also the governments in certain capacities, is seeing, do we need to create a kind of accredited system that would allow for 2 things. One, obviously international standards to be met and having companies kind of understand this, whether a company is at this level or not. They could be educated to get to this level or helped with and supported to get to this level. And B, having a system that is streamlined. One of the biggest problems I saw with VR, I'm sure we all have experienced this, is with the amount of different versions of VR goggles one could buy, it became so fragmented. And I think everyone obviously is very personalized and as I said, focused on their own success. But I think to create a communal filmmaking community that is integrated and has one platform, is it the best thing to do with coming up with an accredited program? And that's what we're talking to BAFTA about right now and MPAA, to see how do we streamline this, but also make it almost a one-stop platform where everyone can integrate and it's not so fragmented. I will say, and it's a chat, of course, I've had with Mr. Fred, with Mr. Fred, that obviously different governments have different needs and different integrations. So I think this is a bigger R&D phase, you could say, that needs to be done. But that's it for me for the production side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yadi. You kind of had an overall look about this virtual production stuff, and I now know that it's not only about the green screen, the green back and the LED walls, but it's all about like the whole process of making films from pre-production to post-production. Thank you very much. So now we have some free time to discuss interactively. We have about 30 minutes. I have been preparing a few questions, so let me start with my question, and then after that you can kind of talk to each other. If you have any question or comment, I think it's you can just raise your hand or mention that you have a comment. Okay. So my first question is that is about investment. So there's a lot of areas to invest in regarding the digital production and distribution. But I want each of you to make comments about which area is the most important area to invest in. So can I start with Scott?
Yeah, so you mean so since we do so many different kind of areas and stuff like that, it's hard to say like which one is the most important, but I could kind of say topically, let's say that we do a lot of children's kind of work. So the child safety and data is really important, especially what we saw on the Hill with Instagram and Facebook earlier. But we're thinking that that regulatory is going to be really important. But kind of what audio is alerting to as well is that hey, if you can have some type of universal body or universal accreditation or something like that, but that becomes increasingly hard because you have profit interests versus safety versus efficiency interests, and then they're all competing against each other, and then then you have government on top of it. But in terms of core kind of investment, I think that for us, efficiency tools and things to kind of streamline things would be the best. And and alluding back to what Adi was saying, we do try to streamline everything all on a similar platform. We try to securitize everything on a similar platform, but but a lot of that requires your own kind of investment in your own infrastructure, because I don't think that you're going to find off the shelf things that are really important. So that's kind of where we'd probably put a lot of the initial kind of investment, because once you do that, then the creativity of a platform to be able to create what you want.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. John, how about you?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I mean, we're sort of looking at it more holistically, industry-wide. So what we're looking at is more the concept of co-working spaces. So we have co-working spaces for the games industry in Australia. And we've located them in Sydney and Adelaide and so on, and we bring commercial companies together, and so they share facilities, and we learn a lot from that. So we're doing the same thing for film. So effectively our grading rooms, finishing rooms, and I think 12 editing suite rooms and all that sort of stuff, they're basically common for all the commercial companies that are sitting inside. The whole concept there is to reduce their actual investment in equipment, including camera systems and so on. So that type of thinking is, I think, smart, because a lot of these companies don't want as much real estate. They don't want large offices. They want to reduce their footprint. Staff are not necessarily, in the office. They'll be there when a production might happen. So that's one area that we're looking at. And the other thing is that I think research is, we're doing quite a bit of research into different methodologies for virtual production. There's a lot of issues there that we've discovered, and so we're doing some research papers. We've actually got 4 researchers. We've commissioned 4 projects to do some research. So I think there's constant research being done. But I agree with Adi. I looked at Yamdu and other products, and nothing really solves the problem. We've got this constant problem. I just finished a film, and it's just gone in post. I think it's finished now, and it was a nightmare. We had all the, not to the same extent that Adi was talking about in terms of Blade Runner and so on, but we had a lot of issues in coordinating different people. So it's actually, I don't know how to solve that. I mean, I've done a technology company. I invented, believe it or not, I invented online games, and I had about 60% of the Chinese market for middleware. It was called Big World, and we sold it to a company called Wargaming. I know what it's like to build technology, and I've done a tech company. It's very, very hard because you've got different people requiring different things, and so you've got to constantly develop it. And it's challenging to do that, and particularly if you're trying to, get the endorsement of an entity. But it's a worthy scenario. I mean, obviously, Epic has succeeded, effectively become an industry standard. So the way I sort of see a lot of these technologies is that you've literally got to have a product that the industry is using, and you become the standard, like Avid and so on. So it's really driven by the customers at the end of the day, and less about the endorsement of a particular entity. It's like who's using what. So when we look at products, we test them out, and generally we find that nothing's there. I mean, obviously Zoom works. We're all using it. So really the market tells you what the product is. But I do agree there has to be a way of integrating some of these components together. But I just don't know. I don't have answers. I see the problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of co-working spaces, but it's just like desks and people are just typing on the PCs. But that one with facilities to make films, that sounds really good. Thank you. So Atsushi, do you have any comments?
Yeah, it's hard to explain. About the internet advertising field, we invest to build a studio, for example, computer graphics, Avatracks, and such a studio we invest for, because we have to create a lot of creativities, short films, commercials, so rapidly. So it's hard to co-work with other companies. So we should do that in our companies. That's why we invest for build studios. And also for Abema TV, about the media business, we also create original contents, film and the drama like that. So that's also a big investment place. And the game, of course, it's the big title. We have to invest a lot. So depends on that. I'm sorry, it's not a clear answer, but yeah, there are many, especially for studios and the people. Yeah, the resources who can care the system or to build up the system. Yeah, a lot of things. Yeah, not clear, sorry. Yeah.
You mentioned people. Is it difficult to get the right people, especially regarding this like new technology stuff?
Yeah, it's hard to find. And in Japan, the language issue is very big. So, for example, we want to find all over the world or from Asia, but most of the people who works in Japanese company speaks only Japanese, so it's hard to co-work in the same place. That's also the issue, right?
Okay, thank you. So Adi, I know that you invest in a lot of things, but what do you think is the most important area to invest in?
I won't take too long here because I think 3 things, if you don't mind, and I'll make it fast. I think the first one.
You can speak slowly. It's better that I can understand.
Perfect. I'll speak slowly. I think the first one is communication. Any tools of communication that would allow anyone to streamline production, as even if we're shooting in Japan, for example, to allow for language barriers, allowing for real-time communication, to allow for efficiency on timing of production as well. I think that's the first one. The second one, to John's point, I think is actually R&D as well, for virtual productions. I think, and excuse me here by saying this, the US is a lot of hype in terms of what they've created. And, one big example of that, and a lot of people may not know, is The Mandalorian obviously was not really all virtual stage. It was probably 20% virtual stage and 80% was all visual effects. Their visual effects budget was ridiculous because they had to fix everything in post-production since it was not a 100% virtual stage production. So to John's point, many people I know, including people in the gaming industry, such as the founder of Supercell, Mika, who's in Finland, he's also trying to build a new virtual stage, has come nowhere near, I would say, something that's ready to go. So I would say definitely R&D, for a proper R&D in that capacity, where we're actually being honest about the information and saying, listen, this is what's actually being done. And I think the last thing would really be, I think there's a divide based on, the existing infrastructure of studios versus the new world of virtual. And I think, the world needs to realize that it can't be one or the other. They have to coexist together, in my opinion, because old Hollywood and the way of production will never go. But new, essentially, platforms and new consumer technologies can add to that. And a very prime example of that, I would say, actually, is Netflix, right? To an extent, where Netflix did not start as a digital company. It started at a very traditional DVD distribution company, and then it went to virtual stage, a virtual world. So even anyone building physical facility, as long as there's virtual tools involved, and as long as you're finding ways to create that, you could still have a hard asset at the same time and make sure they coexist. That would be the final point. Yeah.
Or in other words, cannibalization. They were not afraid of cannibalization with their old business. That's why Netflix was, succeeded. Yeah. Thank you so much. Any of you have any comment about the other presenters' comment? Questions or comments are welcome about this topic.
Mika, thank you so much for this such an excellent panel here for the discussion. And I have a very admire and want to have question to Nakahashi-san, or request for Nakahashi-san. Before that, I want to praise that Mika-san, you have such an excellent panel here. Adi have been so inspiring that bringing the knowledge from Hollywood to Asia, how to put it together. And Scott have been talking about how to put the future into the cloud to work together. And John have been very kind to look at how to educating all the young people or education to the new team of people after the pandemic, all this new technology. The important here, I really want to talk to Nagashima-san, is knowing you have such a creative studio in Japan. We created in talent building of the model, green screen, and LED screen, and all kind of special shooting. So you are actually the user in the feature film or commercial. But with all these new things happening, and not only that, is the new Asia collaboration with the after COVID-19 with technology. How do you, as a user, that with all this new thing you put together, how Japan you can see how you will excel your future work? All these people, what they have shown you, how do you appreciate, and how do you think that will help our ACBS country to work together? So this is the question to Nagashima-san. And also, I add one more thing. Before you answer all this, we also want to know your background. How do you learn all this, and all of a sudden you have a studio and doing everything there?
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, the future, now we are living on a kind of physical place, but in the future, we will work on the virtual office in the future. So now we are, for example, we're producing a digital human and also a virtual space. Now it's under constructions, but in a few years, I think we will work on the same place in metaverse, I think. And the language barrier is also hard issue in the future also. But yeah, for Japanese, we need to learn English more. And what's the next question? Is how background.
Your background.
Okay.
What's now your background?
My background is I do hard work every day. Yeah, that's all. And now I'm here.
Because I think that you have introduced a very excellent panelist, Nakahashi-san, that all our Asian friends from every country, they are young generation, they can visit Japan, visit Nakahashi-san's studio, and they all can create on every country with their own idea, with all these new things coming out. So Nakahashi-san, I hope you'll be the model for all the new young Asian generation.
I will try. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. And his name is Nakahashi-san.
Yeah, happy friends, very good. Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more question for all the panelists. So we kind of touched upon the human resources problem or issue. I'm sure that it's hard to get people and to make them collaborate with remote places to go over the barrier of language and distance and culture and whatever. But we are here to talk about the potential of collaboration among Asian countries. And I'm curious to know what each of you think is important in proceeding the collaboration with Asian countries, especially regarding the digital production. So can I start with Scott again?
Yeah. So our advantage is that we've been working with Asian countries like from the start. So a key that we don't really have too much of a language barrier with Japan because we have a studio in Japan. But then we have people that are multilingual. Sometimes they know 4 or 5 languages: Korean, English, Mandarin. We have people that know, and we're collaborating with Sirsek, for example, in Thailand. And then we have a studio in Chengdu that we work with. So we have to have multilingual people. So what I try to do is that the difference is I don't hire translators. I hire filmmakers or visual effects people or game developers that know the language. So first they have to know their craft. And then the second thing is they have to know language. And then but there's a lot of nuances between the way, for example, we work with a lot of the big Japanese anime production houses, but then we also work with a lot of the Hollywood ones. But the way that they do anime voiceovers, for example, they do everything in post, whereas in the United States, you do the radio play first, and then you animate to the voice. And then but even in live action production, we've kind of seen nuances and differences. China, for example, they like to go really fast and they don't really like to plan too much. I don't want to overly stereotype, but then sometimes because of the pace of how the work is, what Audie and John had shared with me over the years is, well, especially John, I've known him for years, but because of the pace and they're in a hurry, it seems like the planning sometimes is an afterthought a little bit, but then so what you have to do is you can't change that culture. So some of the human resource parts, it's a lot of explaining about culture, why we value planning, why they value something else, and then we have to come to compromises. So there's less about technology and more about people. But I think that the more that ACBS brings these kind of cultures together, bring the know-how together, we'll get to a common place where people start to understand a little bit the other side of things and what they need, because especially all my years of working with Japan, that's almost 27 years now, there are a lot of times where I'm working with a very old company and I'm not used to how the old company likes to do something, but all the gray-haired people don't want to change, and then I realize I have to change because they're not going to change, and then that's how I get it solved. But then young people in the United States, we learn that you could do everything as long as you know enough. But like now, as I get older, I get wiser about how to do that. But if you're able to put the right people together, and then they have the kind of common kind of like goals that you have, that's the best team. But and it's just the hard work of putting a good team together. Like over the years, like I've always told John, like what the hard thing is finding good people. It's not finding people, and I think that's just universally true. But especially working with Asia, you have to kind of find great people that know their craft, but also the language as well and culture. And then so it poses a more difficult problem. But I hope in the future the study of language all over will be like increased, and then people can kind of understand multiple languages, and then I think that'll kind of solve things.
Thank you so much. What about John? You have experiences in China, and also you're educating young people, so I'm curious to know.
Well, I started as a game developer a long time ago, and then when I built the Big Wall technology company, we had offices in Shanghai, Beijing, and Suzhou, and we worked quite extensively with companies like NetEase, which is a big games company in China. So we found at the time that we really had to, train some internal people at NetEase, and then they train additional people, it was interesting because the training really occurred after work. So they might finish at 6, 7 o'clock at night, and they'd be trained effectively till midnight. So they worked tirelessly. I was really impressed with them. So we've done that as a company. We've trained a lot of companies with our technology platform. We even ran conferences. But when it comes to just the basic skills, basic education, it's very much finding people who've got a passion for something. So if it's coding, we'll see them already coding early on. If it's 3D animation, they'll have done some things early on. So we look at the portfolio, we look at their passion. That's our main driver. We see a lot of amazingly talented people, but they don't have the passion to pursue it. They do their 3 years of undergraduate, 2 years, and then within 6 months or a year, they'll leave the industry because there's easier work somewhere else. So finding people that are passionate to actually work on their show reels and so on to enter the industry is the challenging part, and we work a lot on that. On the other end, when I'm looking at producing films, one of the challenges I think with say working with Asia is finding projects that we can do that will actually serve a global market. So, for example, I'm working at the moment with a director called Philip Noyce, and we're working on a $100 million Australian film. Now that's an oxymoron because you can't make a $100 million Australian film because no one will watch it apart from Australians, and it's very hard to sell a $100 million film and make your money back. So that's the problem we have, and similarly, I see a lot of Asian projects which are very specific to that country. So how do we actually develop projects that actually have a wide appeal? So when I was making video games in the early days for a startup company called Electronic Arts, back when EA was 50, 100 people big, the challenge there was, we looked at, there were 3 concepts that Trip Hawkins from Electronic Arts had. The concepts were hot, simple, and deep. So he said, a game has to be hot, it's got to be very popular, it's got to be deep, it's got to have a lot of replayability inside it, and hot, simple, and it's got to be hot, simple, and that's right, and deep. And the simplicity is the actual entrance, being able to enter the game very, very quickly. So with films, how do you create films that will work for a market, for a wider market, even though they've got Australiana themes or maybe some Asian themes? Best example we have in Australia is Road Warrior, or Mel Gibson's, big film. And that worked really, really well across the world. But it's very hard to find films that do that. So that's a challenging part for projects. In cooperation, how do you find something that will work well for both parties? This is not dealing with the language issue, it's just dealing with a commercial issue, finding the right projects. We don't see many of them. We see a lot of Australian productions that'll do well in Australia, possibly, but not well overseas. That's a challenge for us. Thank you.
Definitely, Japan has the same issue. Thank you. So, Atsushi,
Yep.
have any comments about the collaboration among Asian countries?
Yes. Actually, the technology helps make people to be a creator, everybody. So actually, before it was very difficult to finish the one film. But now with iPhone, everybody can make the creative contents now. And so, for example, teenager, a young generation people create a lot of things. So if we could make a lot of creatives, It means we can communicate without language. We can talk with creative things. So maybe that things connect from Japan, Korea, China, Australia, US, UK, all over the world, so that the creativities will connect all over the world, I think, I hope. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's true. Okay, what about you, Eddie?
Yeah, I would also, I think just two things, and I would say definitely also Nakahashi-san in terms of what he's saying. I mean, you know, with my background being born in Japan and family there for 40 years, and I can speak Japanese all the way to growing up in Singapore, you know, between Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, in terms of being in Singapore, but traveling to those areas, and then going and working at the, you know, Hollywood studios and going to Tisch at NYU in New York. I think, you know, being able to see East and West has been interesting. I think from a human resource perspective for Asia, the big thing is, I think from my perspective is there's still fragmented culture, right? India is very Indian in terms of how they operate on things. Japan has its own ways. Singapore has its own ways. Thailand has its own ways. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's important to promote culture, but I think we need practical, I think the word I would use is practical education, where an individual from Japan who hasn't experienced what it feels like to maybe, or a young individual who hasn't experienced what it feels like to do some type of practical project in another region or another territory of Asia has the experience to go do that. So they can learn and understand the culture, understand the integration. And then that, to me, you know, creates a youth that's coming up that basically understands culture and understands almost a third culture kid, you could say, in a very generic sense, which I think would allow for integration to occur more in the kind of Asian kind of countries and region. And then I think, secondly, 100% on what Takashi-san's saying is that I think technology is almost a form of communication without having to really understand the language. And I think that surpasses that. I will say one thing to John's point. I think content is very interesting as well, because I think content has been, I guess, positioned in a way where I feel like it comes down to what kind of film, what kind of project and return are you looking to obviously get from a project, right? Hollywood is Hollywood because at the end of the day, they make English language movies, right? And English, it really comes down to language in that capacity. That English is the biggest speaking, you know, obviously, you know, language in the world. And obviously that is then really in relation to a population of how many people understand English, which then tells you what is your box office going to look like in that capacity. And I think if you look at Indonesia, for example, and what they're doing, which is fantastic, is just local language films that are killing it, that are probably making better profit margins than some Hollywood films, to be very frank with you, at, you know, $100 to $200 million. Films at 2 million or 1 million in Indonesia, or just or even 5 million, are doing so well that, you know, it's amazing to see. And then you have films like Parasite, of course, that have, you know, killed it in terms of globally, taken a bit of time to grow to the global market, but obviously full local language kind of film, of course, into the Korean language. And I think Netflix has obviously becoming a global standard as a platform. It's helped, of course, power the fact that local language films can make a lot of money, and cross-language films that don't have English can also do that. It just comes down to how do you position it, you know, that's all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adi. We are running out of time, so would anybody like to make any final comments? Okay, okay, Camille.
Well, this is just a quick one. Adi mentioned something about the financing, the accounting part, and blockchain. I mean, it's just a comment that I think that this is one of the areas that will gain importance as we move along, because of the way that films or content are being funded today. Chances are we are talking about multiple investors, multiple sources of funds. So meaning, once we resolve this problem, and transparency, as you were saying earlier, is the key behind the blockchain process. And I think that's where we should be heading, because without the funding, without the investment, there'll be a problem creating the content anyway, and the distribution as well. Thank you.
Well said, Dr. Kamal. Yeah, if you don't mind me saying, I fully agree, Dr. Kamal, in that capacity. And I guess that leads to a second question I have for Takahashi-san, actually, which is basically, I mean, metaverse, you mentioned metaverse, sorry, Nakahashi-san, apologies. For metaverse, do you feel like it will be, I mean, I think my big concern always has been, you know, looking at, again, the VR angle, that there's so many platforms. And if it continues to create, if people create multiple metaverses, then you continue to fragment another layer of communication and collaboration. Do you think there will ever be a time where we can integrate on one metaverse for the movie industry or gaming industry, for example?
Well, I have mixed views because I'm really having problems with TikTok being sort of poised as the platform for new filmmakers. I mean, I just attended, you know, a little session conference where these were seen by some as being the means by which we mine talent and so on and so forth. Well, I may be old school, but I think when you are creating cinema, it's not just about pointing a little camera, shooting and hoping. You know, it's just like a bit of groping in the dark. But then again, it's a very personal view, and I think it will be a good subject later. I mean, provided ACBS, you know, picks this up as a possible something that we could further explore and unpeel. Because imagine in Malaysia today, when they are doing casting auditions, they are looking for people with 1 million or more followers. And that's making things a bit ridiculous as well. And this is why I like the idea of Nakahashi-san mentioning about virtual humans. Yes, that will solve a lot of problems. Because we're not talking that, because we are missing the storytelling part, the tales that should be told. And right now, everybody is so obsessed with this technology part, which is why, I mean, I raised that idea. Metaverse is fine. I mean, that's already, I mean, Facebook is already giving us a little hint of what life is about today, especially during COVID. I mean, that's your point of communication. Twitter, well, I think Facebook is more popular because it could transcend, you know, a few things. I mean, who's interested to know what are you having for dinner tonight? But that has become like a story to be told. Anyway, these are the little bits and pieces. So Metaverse will present a new dimension. And of course, virtual humans, your avatars will be key. But you see, it is bringing creativity into like another sort of plane. And this is where people like me are thinking about cinema. I mean, I'm a cinema person. So I feel that cinema can be threatened. The real essence of the language of cinema can be threatened if these things are not kept under, I wouldn't say control, you can't control them, but some sort of context. That TikTok is really meant for fun, you know, no different than, you know, whether you swim in the English Channel for a swim or you're trying to cross over to France. Okay, I mean, that's the nearest I could actually put. Thank you, Mika.
Okay. Thank you, Camille. Yeah, well, if you start wondering about like blockchain or like metaverse, we can go on for another 5 hours maybe. But I feel like at the end, the most important thing is about the stories and about the human aspects of the contents, no matter, you know, how technology changes. And I think as Asian countries, we can share something, you know, but at the same time, I felt like, as Adi probably mentioned, it's fragmented culture as well. So when we talk about Asian collaboration, you know, we are still in the trial and error stage about how to make the actual content in Asian countries by collaboration that's, you know, that can go global. So I think that's our continuous agenda to, you know, keep for the next session, which will be in Hong Kong. Okay, so yeah, this is the end of the panel discussion. I would like to thank all the panelists for your great presentation and great discussion. I think, you know, audience could enjoy our conversation. Okay, so thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you.